If you have a true scary experience that you would like to share with me, then my email is in the description below. And now let's get into tonight's story. I never believed that a single sentence could ruin someone's life. A joke, a challenge, an invitation spoken into the dark. 3 words. Come if you're there. That was all it took. And within weeks, Emily Carter became convinced that something had followed her home. Something that refused to leave. Something that seemed to know exactly when she was alone. And the most terrifying part, it wasn't trying to kill her. It wanted her afraid. It wanted her exhausted. And it wanted complete control. This story was shared by Emily from Vancouver, Canada. The events happened in late 2024 while she was working remotely as a content writer. At the time, Emily was 23 years old. Her father had recently become seriously ill and could no longer work. Her mother worked part-time, but most of the financial responsibility had fallen onto Emily's shoulders. Every month she paid the rent, covered household expenses, and still tried to save enough money to build a better future. The pressure was overwhelming, but there was one thing that always helped her escape: traveling. Whenever work allowed it, Emily would move to a new city for a few weeks, work during the day, explore at night, then move on to the next destination. That autumn she decided to spend several months in a small mountain town in British Columbia. The place was popular with backpackers, digital nomads, and photographers. She rented a bed inside a shared hostel. The dorm contained 10 beds. 8 were occupied. Emily's bed sat in the far corner near a large window. Across from her slept a girl named Sarah. The two quickly became close friends. Sarah was a university student working on a photography project and planned to stay for only a month. Emily had already been living there for almost 3 months. Life felt peaceful. The mountains were beautiful. The air was fresh. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she could breathe again. But there was one thing she hated. Directly outside the hostel stood an enormous dead tree. The trunk was twisted. The branches looked like skeletal fingers, stretching toward the sky. Even during the daytime it looked unsettling. At night it became something else entirely. The locals often joked about it. Some claimed they had seen shadows moving between the branches. Others swore they heard whispers near the tree after midnight. Most people laughed about the stories, but Emily never liked looking at it. Every time she glanced toward the window she felt uncomfortable, as if someone might be staring back. One evening a pair of social media creators checked into the hostel. One of them had built a large audience online, and Emily became interested in learning more about content creation. After a brief conversation, they agreed to meet later that evening and discuss social media strategies. Emily was excited. She hoped the meeting might help her improve her own career. Around sunset, everyone gathered outside the hostel. Several chairs had been placed near the common area overlooking the river. The conversation started casually. Content creation, algorithms, brand deals, audience growth. Hours passed without anyone noticing. The sky grew darker. The temperature dropped, and the only sounds were the river flowing nearby and the occasional rustling of leaves. Throughout the conversation, Emily kept glancing toward the dead tree. Something about it made her nervous. One of the creators noticed. "What keeps pulling your attention over there?" he asked. Emily pointed toward the tree. "I don't know. That thing just creeps me out." The creator laughed, but his friend turned toward the darkness and smirked. "Oh yeah? The haunted tree." Then he stood up, faced the tree, and shouted into the night, "If anyone's hiding there, come on out." Nothing happened. Everyone laughed. But then he shouted again, louder this time, "Come if you're there." Emily immediately felt uncomfortable. "Don't do that," she said. The guy laughed. "What? You think something's actually listening?" Emily shook her head, but her stomach tightened. The mountains suddenly felt quieter than before. The air felt colder. For a brief second she thought she saw movement near the branches. A dark shape, watching. Then it disappeared. The conversation continued, but Emily couldn't focus anymore. Eventually she stood up, said goodnight, and returned to her room. That night she fell asleep faster than usual. But sometime after midnight, she woke up suddenly. Not because of a sound, not because of a nightmare, but because she felt something standing beside her bed, watching her. And when she slowly opened her eyes, she realized she couldn't move. Emily tried to move, but nothing happened. Her arms wouldn't respond. Her legs felt frozen. Even her voice refused to come out. The room was dark except for a faint light coming through the window. She could still see the outlines of the other beds. She could hear the soft sound of people breathing. Everything seemed normal, except for one thing. There was someone standing beside her bed. At first she thought it was Sarah. Maybe her friend had gotten up during the night. But the figure was too tall, much taller, and completely motionless. Emily stared at it, trying to understand what she was looking at. The shape appeared darker than the darkness around it. like a shadow that didn't belong there. Her heart started racing. The figure slowly leaned forward, and suddenly Emily felt pressure on her chest, as if something heavy had climbed on top of her. She tried to scream. Nothing came out. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the pressure vanished, the figure disappeared, and her body suddenly unlocked. Emily sat up immediately, gasping for air. Sweat covered her face. She looked around the room. Everyone was asleep, including Sarah. The figure was gone. The room looked completely normal. For several minutes Emily remained awake, trying to convince herself that it had only been sleep paralysis. Eventually she lay back down. But sleep didn't come easily. The next morning she didn't tell anyone, not because she was embarrassed, but because she wasn't sure what had happened. The day passed normally. Emily worked from her laptop, answered emails, finished assignments, and tried to forget the previous night. By evening she almost convinced herself it had been a strange dream. But that feeling didn't last long. Around sunset she noticed something strange. Every time she walked past the window, she felt as though someone outside was watching her. The dead tree stood exactly where it always had, its twisted branches swaying gently in the wind. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening, yet Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. Looking back, that night the hostel lost power. A storm had damaged electrical lines somewhere in town. The staff announced the electricity might not return until the next day. Most guests grabbed flashlights and portable chargers. Emily and Sarah decided to spend the evening on the rooftop terrace. Several other guests joined them. The atmosphere felt relaxed. People chatted. Some listened to music. Others worked from their laptops. A young man sat nearby drinking beer while staring out toward the mountains. Emily recognized him as another guest from the hostel. Everyone seemed calm for a while. Then Emily heard footsteps, a slow, deliberate sound, coming from the rooftop staircase. She looked up immediately. Nobody was there. The staircase was empty. A few minutes later, she heard it again. Step, 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 as if someone was climbing toward them. Emily looked at Sarah. Did you hear that? Sarah frowned. Hear what? The footsteps. Sarah listened. Nothing. I think you're imagining things, she said. The conversation continued. Emily tried to ignore it, but her attention kept drifting toward the staircase. Then it happened. A loud series of footsteps suddenly rushed across the wooden rooftop floor. Fast, heavy, and directly toward her. Before she could react, something tapped her shoulder. Emily screamed. The sound echoed across the rooftop. Everyone jumped. The man holding the beer nearly dropped his bottle. People stared at her. What happened? Someone asked. Emily stood frozen, her face completely pale. Someone touched me, she whispered. Nobody had been standing near her. Nobody. The group searched the rooftop. Nothing. No one. No explanation. Emily immediately grabbed Sarah's arm. I'm going back downstairs. Sarah could tell her friend was genuinely frightened, so she followed. Back inside the dorm room, Emily avoided discussing what happened. She simply climbed into bed and pretended everything was fine. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Very wrong. Around 1 in the morning, she finally drifted to sleep. And once again, she woke up unable to move. This time was different. Much worse. The pressure on her chest returned, stronger than before. The room felt freezing cold. Emily's eyes moved toward the foot of her bed. And there, slowly forming out of the darkness, was a black cloud. It twisted, moved, and began taking shape, like something trying to become human. Emily desperately tried to speak. She tried to pray. She tried to force words out, but her mouth barely worked. The shadow continued growing, becoming clearer, closer, and then Emily realized the thing wasn't standing at the foot of her bed anymore. It was moving toward her, and it was smiling. The smile wasn't human. It stretched far too wide, far wider than any normal face should be able to. Emily wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to wake everyone in the room, but she couldn't move. The black figure continued leaning closer, its face becoming clearer with every second. Then suddenly, someone grabbed Emily's shoulder. She gasped and shot upright in bed. Sarah was standing beside her, concerned. Emily, are you okay? You were making strange noises. Emily looked around frantically. The shadow was gone. The room was normal again. Everyone else was asleep. For several seconds she couldn't even answer. Her entire body was shaking. I'm fine. She finally lied. Sarah looked unconvinced, but eventually returned to her bed. Emily remained awake until sunrise. The next few days became a nightmare. Every morning she woke up exhausted. Even after sleeping for 8 or 9 hours, it felt like she hadn't rested at all. Dark circles appeared beneath her eyes, her appetite disappeared, and a constant headache followed her everywhere. Then the fever started. At first it was mild, nothing serious. But each day it became worse. Emily blamed stress, long work hours, lack of sleep, anything except the truth she was beginning to fear. By the fourth day she could barely focus on work. Words blurred together on her laptop screen. Simple tasks felt impossible. Her clients started asking questions. Deadlines were being missed. And Emily knew something was wrong. That evening she stayed inside the dorm room while everyone else explored town. The fever had become unbearable. She wrapped herself in blankets despite feeling hot enough to burn. Around midnight she finally drifted to sleep, and immediately found herself standing somewhere else. A dream, or at least she thought it was. She stood alone in a forest. Everything around her was covered in fog. The trees stretched endlessly into the darkness. Silent, still, dead. Emily slowly turned and saw someone standing between the trees, watching her. The figure looked exactly like the shadow from her room, except now it appeared clearer, taller, more solid, more real. Its eyes reflected faint silver light. The creature raised one hand and pointed directly at her, then spoke. For the first time, its voice sounded low, cold, and impossible to forget. "You invited me." Emily froze. The words echoed through the forest. "You invited me," the creature repeated, then took a step forward. Emily turned and ran. Branches tore at her clothes. Roots nearly tripped her. But no matter how fast she ran, the sound of footsteps remained behind her, getting closer, closer, closer. Then she woke up screaming. The entire dorm room jumped awake. Several people turned on their phone flashlights. Sarah rushed to her side. Emily's breathing was completely out of control. She could barely speak. "What happened?" Sarah asked. Emily shook her head. "I don't know." And for the first time, that wasn't a lie. The next morning things got worse. Much worse. When Emily stepped out of bed, her legs immediately gave out. She collapsed onto the floor. The impact startled everyone nearby. Guests rushed over to help her. Someone checked her temperature. 104 degrees. She was burning up. Several hours later she found herself sitting inside a small medical clinic. The doctor examined her carefully. Blood pressure normal. Heart rate elevated. No infection. No obvious illness. Nothing explained the fever. The doctor prescribed medication and advised her to rest. But the medication changed nothing. The fever stayed, the nightmares stayed, and the feeling of being watched never left. Then came the most terrifying night yet. Emily woke around 3 in the morning. Not because of a nightmare. Not because of sleep paralysis. But because she felt someone sitting on the edge of her bed. The mattress had visibly sunk downward, as though a person was there. Emily slowly opened her eyes. The room was dark, silent, and completely still. Yet the weight remained. Something was sitting beside her. She could feel it. Every instinct screamed at her not to look, but she did anyway. Slowly, terrified, she turned her head toward the edge of the bed, and saw a dark hand resting only inches from her leg. A hand that definitely did not belong to any human being. Emily's entire body locked in place. The hand remained there, resting on the edge of the mattress. Long fingers, unnaturally thin, far too dark to belong to any normal person. For several seconds she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't even blink. Then the hand slowly began moving, one finger at a time, crawling across the blanket toward her leg. Emily finally found her voice, and screamed. The dorm room exploded into chaos. People sat upright, lights turned on, someone cursed. Sarah jumped from her bed and rushed toward Emily. But the moment the lights came on, the hand vanished. There was nothing there, nothing at all. Emily was shaking so badly she could barely speak. Everyone assumed she was suffering from stress, exhaustion, or severe nightmares. Nobody believed something supernatural was happening, but Emily knew what she had seen, and deep down, she knew it wasn't over. The following day she called her mother. The moment her mother's voice answered, Emily broke down crying. Everything came pouring out. The nightmares, the shadow, the sleep paralysis, the fever, the hand, the feeling of being watched. For nearly an hour Emily explained everything. Her mother listened quietly, then finally spoke. There might be someone who can help. Emily wiped tears from her face. Who? Her mother hesitated, then mentioned a distant relative named Victor. Victor lived several provinces away. According to family stories, he had spent years studying spiritual practices. People often contacted him whenever strange things happened. Emily had never paid attention to those stories before. Now she was desperate. That evening she called him. The conversation began normally. Victor asked a few questions. When did it start? Where were you? What exactly happened? Emily answered everything honestly. The moment she finished, silence filled the phone. For nearly 10 seconds Victor said nothing. Then his voice changed, became serious, concerned, almost frightened. Emily, I think something attached itself to you. A cold chill ran down her spine. What do you mean? Victor sighed. Some entities need permission. An invitation. Sometimes people give it without realizing. Emily immediately remembered the dead tree, and the words shouted into the darkness. Come if you're there. Her stomach dropped. Victor continued, if that's what happened, this isn't going away on its own. Emily felt her hands trembling. What do I do? Another long silence. Then Victor spoke again. There are ways to remove it. But they aren't easy, and they aren't cheap. Emily frowned. What does that mean? Victor explained that special rituals would be necessary. Travel, materials, preparation. It would cost thousands of dollars. Money Emily didn't have. Her heart sank. She could barely pay her own bills. There was no way she could afford something like that. Victor told her to think about it, then ended the call. That night Emily sat alone in the dorm room, trying to process everything. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. The dead tree swayed in the darkness. And for the first time, Emily began wondering whether someone was lying to her. Something about Victor's explanation felt wrong. Not impossible, just wrong. Like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. 3 days later, her mother called again, this time with different news. A family friend had recommended an elderly spiritual counselor living near Vancouver. Someone known for helping people who believed they were experiencing paranormal activity. Unlike Victor, this man wasn't asking for money. At least not beyond a normal consultation fee. Emily agreed immediately. Anything was better than doing nothing. The appointment was scheduled for the following week. But before that meeting could happen, the entity made its move. That night, Emily woke once again around 3 in the morning. The room felt freezing cold, her breath visible in the darkness. At first she thought she was dreaming. Then she heard a voice, a whisper, right beside her ear. So close it felt like someone's lips were touching her skin. The voice spoke only one sentence, and those words nearly stopped her heart. Don't let them take me away. Emily froze. The whisper came again, closer, angrier. Don't let them take me away. Then suddenly, the mattress sank beside her, as though something invisible had just sat down. And this time, she knew, whatever had followed her from that tree, was terrified of the meeting she was about to attend. The next morning, Emily looked worse than ever. Her skin was pale. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and she hadn't slept properly in almost 2 weeks. Every night brought something new. A voice, a shadow, a touch, or the feeling that someone was standing beside her bed, watching, waiting. The appointment finally arrived. The elderly counselor lived outside the city in a quiet rural area surrounded by forests. Emily's mother insisted on meeting her there. When Emily arrived, the house looked completely ordinary. No strange symbols, no dramatic decorations, nothing that resembled the image she had expected. An older man opened the door. He looked calm, friendly, and surprisingly normal. The moment he saw Emily, his smile disappeared. For several seconds he simply stared at her. Then he stepped aside. Come in. Emily immediately felt nervous. The man led them into a small room. A simple wooden table stood in the center. Nothing else. No candles. No rituals. No theatrics. The man sat down across from Emily and asked her to tell him everything. So she did. From the dead tree, to the invitation, to the nightmares, the sleep paralysis, the whispers, the fever, everything. The man listened without interrupting. When she finally finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed heavily. What followed you, he said quietly, was already there long before you arrived. Emily felt a chill. What does that mean? The man folded his hands. Some places attract things. Most never notice them. But sometimes, someone opens a door. The room became silent. Then the man looked directly into Emily's eyes. That invitation wasn't directed at nothing. Emily's stomach tightened. The counselor reached across the table and gently touched her wrist. The moment he did, Emily felt a violent pain shoot through her head. Like electricity, a horrible scream exploded inside her mind. Not outside, inside. She nearly fell from her chair. Her mother rushed forward, but the old man remained calm. It's reacting, he said. It's scared. Emily stared at him. What is? The counselor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up and walked toward a nearby shelf. From it, he retrieved a small braided cord. Nothing special, just a simple woven bracelet. He returned and handed it to her. Wear this. Don't remove it. Emily looked confused. That's it. The man nodded. For now. Then his expression became serious. Very serious. There is something else you need to know. The room suddenly felt colder. What? The old man took a deep breath. Someone has been manipulating you. Emily frowned. What do you mean? The counselor looked directly at her mother, then back at Emily. The relative you spoke to. Victor? The name hit like a hammer. What about him? The old man's eyes narrowed. He knows much more than he admitted. Emily felt her pulse rising. What are you saying? The counselor leaned forward. I'm saying, the thing attached to you is real. But the fear, the confusion, the desperation, someone was feeding it. Neither Emily nor her mother spoke. The counselor continued, be very careful who you trust. Then he suddenly stopped talking. His attention shifted toward the window. His face turned pale. For the first time since arriving, Emily saw genuine fear in his eyes. Slowly, very slowly, the old man stood up and stared into the darkness outside. What is it? Emily asked. No answer. The counselor continued staring, then whispered, almost to himself, it's here? Emily turned toward the window. At first she saw nothing. Only trees, darkness, and rain. Then a tall shadow stepped between the trees, watching the house, watching them, and when it realized Emily could see it, the shadow smiled. I froze. The thing standing near the road wasn't human. It looked like a tall shadow wearing a dark coat. No face, no eyes, just darkness. The cold around me became unbearable. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. Then it slowly raised one arm and pointed directly at me. A voice echoed inside my head, not through my ears, inside my mind. You should have left when you had the chance. At that exact moment my phone rang. The sound snapped me back to reality. I looked down. It was Emma. When I looked up again, the figure was gone, completely gone. I answered immediately. Emma sounded terrified. She said she had just received a strange email from an unknown address. There was no subject line, no text, only one attachment, a photograph. When she opened it, her blood ran cold. Because the photo showed our hostel room, taken from inside, while we were sleeping. Neither of us had ever seen that photo before, and it had been taken only a few hours earlier. At the bottom of the image was a timestamp, 3:13 a.m., the exact time I woke up every night. Then Emma told me something even worse. In the corner of the photograph, standing beside my bed, was the same dark figure I had just seen near the road, watching me sleep. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she whispered, we need to leave tonight. I agreed. No arguments, no hesitation. That evening we packed everything and booked tickets out of town. Before leaving, I decided to visit the old Riverside temple one last time. Something kept pulling me there. The old priest was waiting outside, almost like he knew I was coming. When he saw me, his expression turned serious. He handed me a small red thread and said, keep this with you. I asked him why. He looked straight into my eyes and replied, because it followed you from the tree. My heart nearly stopped. I had never told him about the tree, not once. Then he continued, it was invited. The moment he said those words, I remembered that night, the influencer's friend laughing, looking toward the tree, and saying, come if you're really there. The priest nodded slowly, as if he already knew. Then he gave one final warning. Whatever happens, never answer if it calls your name at night. And with that, he walked back inside the temple, leaving me standing there alone, holding the red thread, and wondering what exactly had attached itself to me. The next morning Emma and I left Richford immediately. I returned to my hometown. For the first time in weeks I felt safe. My parents were relieved to see me, but deep inside, I knew the nightmare wasn't over. The red thread never left my wrist. Day after day things seemed normal. No shadows, no whispers, no sleep paralysis, nothing. I started believing it was finally gone. Then exactly 6 days later, at 2:47 a.m., I woke up suddenly. My room was freezing, much colder than normal. I checked the window. It was closed. The door was locked, yet the temperature kept dropping. Then I heard it. 3 slow knocks from inside my closet. Knock, knock, knock. My entire body went numb. I stared at the closet door, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Then another 3 knocks came, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. My hands were shaking. I reached for my phone. No signal, no internet, nothing. The room felt wrong, like something invisible was standing beside me, watching, waiting. Then I heard my name, a whisper, right next to my ear. Sarah. I remembered the priest's warning instantly. Never answer if it calls your name. I stayed silent. The whisper came again, closer, more aggressive. Sarah. Tears filled my eyes. Every instinct told me to respond, but I didn't. Then the closet door slowly creaked open, by itself. Darkness poured out from inside, thicker than any shadow I'd ever seen, and standing in the middle of it was the same figure, tall, black, motionless. The thing took one step forward, then another. The red thread around my wrist suddenly felt hot, burning hot. The figure stopped, its head tilted, almost like it was confused. Then a deep growl echoed through the room. The thread became brighter and brighter, until a flash of red light exploded across the room. I covered my eyes. A loud scream filled the air. Not human, not animal, something else, something ancient. Then silence, complete silence. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone. The closet was empty. The room felt normal again. The freezing cold had disappeared. I sat there until sunrise, too scared to move, too scared to sleep. The next day I returned to the temple, but when I asked about the old priest, nobody knew who I was talking about. Every worker there gave me the same answer. No priest matching that description has ever worked here. I showed them the red thread. One elderly man looked at it and quietly said, "Then someone was protecting you." I never saw the shadow again, never heard my name whispered at night again, and life slowly returned to normal. But even today, whenever I wake up around 3 a.m., I still check the closet first, just to make sure nothing is standing there, watching me from the darkness. So that's the story. If you have a terrifying experience of your own and want it featured on this channel, you can send it to the email address provided in the video description. And who knows, your story might be the next one shared here. Stay safe, sleep carefully, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.